right. Welcome, everybody. So glad you've been able to join us today. No, got another month behind you in teaching and all kinds of great things going on in your classrooms. Just so excited that you have joined us today for our new teacher network, and so happy to have Rick Fisher with us. If you're not familiar with the Thoughtful Classroom, let me tell you, it is a wonderful resource with just a great number of tools that you can take and use the next day in your classroom. And so many of them are around different topics like classroom management, engagement. So just a wonderful resource, and just so thankful to have Rick Fisher here with us today from the Thoughtful Classroom to share with you all about strategic school tools that support teaching at the most effective level. Thank you, Rick, for being here. You are phenomenal. We appreciate you.
Oh, that's very kind, Mary. Thank you so much for that introduction. Good afternoon, teachers. Gosh, I'll echo Mary's sentiment about so happy you could be joining us this afternoon and that you have an interest in teaching and learning and growing your craft. And I hope in the next hour I can offer some things to help you on your journey. And it's been 35 years since I was a new teacher, but I remember it pretty well. And so I'll bring some things to you today to help you along the way. And, the title of this is Strategic Tools. And Mary talked about Thoughtful Classroom and the fact that we talk about tools. We say, well, what is a tool? Well, think about it this way. You know what a hammer is, you know what a wrench is, a screwdriver. Those are also tools. And those tools help solve certain types of mechanical problems that you need to fix. And in the teaching and learning business, our tools are things that make the hard work of teaching and learning a little easier as well. And so when you think about these things as tools to solve the problems of practice that you have. And so there may be a lot of you in the audience today that's not familiar with our work. And so we wanted to kind of do a little introduction on that. I'm an informal kind of guy. I'm down here in Scottsville, Kentucky, born and raised here in rural Kentucky, and proud to be a member of the Thoughtful Classroom organization. I've been associated with them, although I worked in school districts until I retired um, after 30 years. But I've been working with the Thoughtful Classroom using these tools, some of which I'm going to share with you today, for over 20 years. So I'm a big believer in this work. Glad you're here. Please ask questions. Stop me along the way. I'm happy to do that. I want this to be very powerful for you. And so we'll try to go deep on a few things and so that you walk away with a clear path on that. Thinking about the idea of being a new teacher, it's important for all of us to think about, you know, um, a foundation. And if you look at these two pictures and ask yourself, what's the difference? Well, the difference is one of them was built 5,000 years ago, and the other one began tilting 5 minutes after it was built. And we know that foundations for structures are very, very important. Without a solid foundation, structures won't stand. And so the strength of a building really lies in its foundation. And this is also true in classrooms. Having a solid foundation for learning in the classroom is very important. And it is the job one of every teacher. And so I want to look at some particular artifacts to talk about where can we gather some information about what is a foundation supposed to look like in our classrooms. And we can go no further than to our teaching framework in Kentucky, the thing that our evaluation system is based on, the Kentucky Adapted Danielson Framework. And I just want to show you a couple of clips where it describes the kind of learning um, that we should be building on our foundations. And here's the first one. One of the things we have to avoid in our classrooms in the 21st century are what we call the terrible twos. Too much teacher talk, too much busy work, and too little thinking. And Danielson framework, our framework here in Kentucky, is referring to that concept right here, I think, when they talk about, a worksheet is not going to create great engagement. It's not going to help kids really learn and remember concepts deeply. It's good for practice. I'm not saying don't use a worksheet. I'm just saying it's not enough, right? It's if you really want kids to be engaged, it has to be more than that. There has to be more going on. And similar, you find information on what should our foundation be built on in our classrooms. Another artifact from Danielson framework, and they really talk about that. When kids are engaged, they're discussing, they're debating, they're answering what if type questions, discovering patterns. There's a lot of thinking going on in the classroom. And so we want to build our classroom foundation around these kind of things. But it's easy to talk about it in words. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I want to show you a little montage video of these are thoughtful classrooms, teachers who've been trained in thoughtful classroom practices and tools. And it's a little montage of different teachers. And the actions you see on the screen are being created by the tools that you see pop up underneath. And so I would like to start.
When we're doing a concept map, what are we trying to think about? Go ahead and turn and talk to a partner. Of like of living words. So like it kind of like words like poison and pain. Yeah.
So we have 22 we will have 22 people, but then we have space for 4 more at the ends of the table. How many tables or how many seats?
Yeah, like we went Josiah because someone lost one of their senses like smell, vision, God, things like breathing.
From a couple of tables to share out what did your group agree on? What main idea, what conclusion did you come to?
The main idea is dogs have many special skills and save many lives.
It was 421 because it was a tool that no matter which lesson I'm using it on, it gives every student a voice and allows them to be engaged. I really like when the students are listening to each other and they're communicating their ideas to each other, and it's not me telling them what to think, it's them showing me how they're thinking.
On to what Lisa said, a bad attitude can affect you greatly because you won't be able to learn correctly. You won't focus at all. Having a good attitude can affect you because you will be able to learn.
At the end of the story, he ends up like everybody else, dehumanized and brainwashed. So
I don't think that type of ending is supposed to be interpreted as okay, he won, the government won, or, so humanity is lost or whatever. We shouldn't let society and humanity get so low that we accept a society like that one in 1984. Something like that is not acceptable.
Yeah. All right, so we had a lot of ideas. I'm gonna
talking about why you selected those pieces of text evidence. She got up from her desk expecting a disaster, and that's exactly what happens. Because she's saying that she can't speak the words, so she doesn't like them because she's just getting too frustrated and she can't even speak them. And that is like, would you think like that? If she wasn't thinking a disaster would happen, she wouldn't be thinking, or if she could speak it well, she probably wouldn't think there would be a disaster.
Do you think I think that one kind of goes along with this one. Do you think we should put it on top?
I think we should.
Okay.
Yeah, and
yeah.
But starting Beatles is not really much accident because it's right now daytime.
correct.
But I can bet you when nobody's here at school and lights are out, he's moving a lot. So that's how they got their name, because they're only active at night. I rest my case.
A connection between two relatively totally different things.
It's like a can opener by a can opener being useless without having a can to open. And their can opener, which I relate to their feelings, was there, but yet the can to open, which is their opportunity, was.
And the crickets live in hotter or colder environment. I think it'd be adaptation because they have to adapt to it, either whether it's cold or hot, so they have to adapt to it.
I'm sorry, it seems to be going over here.
Choose light. Choose light.
Are you sure? It's going back? Nope, it's okay.
It's up to you.
It shows light, right?
Lots of stories lately, and we've been working on different genres. And one of the genres we worked on was folk literature. Take a minute to think in your minds about folk literature. Let me see you thinking. Let me see thinking children. Think about.
So a little montage of various grade levels and subject area teachers. And well, we end there with Andrea, a kindergarten teacher. I always say if I was a first grade teacher, and there's a good reason why I would not be a first grade teacher. But my wife is a kindergarten teacher, so I understand that, but I wouldn't be very good at doing it. I was a middle school science teacher. But, you know, watching her class in kindergarten, the thinking that goes on in there, she's talking about genres and she's talking about folk literature. And she asks her kids to come up with 5 ideas about folk literature. Man, they whip that out like nothing. And it's amazing what the thinking and the hard work they do at the kindergarten level. So I'd love to just take a couple of minutes and I'm actually going to just stop this for a second so we can just focus on what we saw. And I'd love to hear from you about what you noticed. What stood out to you about these classrooms? What were some general patterns that you saw?
Feel free to unmute or you can drop it in the chat. While I know some of them are typing, I'm going to go ahead and say, because, you know, I'm a little on the older side here, where from my from my side, I heard talking. I heard a lot of talking, whereas back in the day when I was in school, there was not much talking. And in the chat is student engagement, so too. But talking, a lot of students talking and were engaged is another comment in the chat.
Good. You definitely see a lot of conversation happening. And think about the conversation that you actually see. You know, kids are very focused on rigorous content, they're on task, they're engaged, and you can stop me anytime, Mary, if somebody has another thought comes in. But you know, and if you ask those teachers, man, how did you create that? I mean, how did you start that? And they'll say, man, we didn't start that way. We had to really build this classroom culture so that students know they have to be on task and in order to be able to, you know, accomplish those kind of things. But these are normal classrooms, just like anybody's, and so these can be created. And you notice the tool running at the bottom of each one. So they're applying a tool creates that kind of thinking and doing. And so I just wanted to, I think a picture's worth 1,000 words, as I said, and just wanted to kind of give you a little feel for that idea. So how can we, I mean, how can we as teachers, you know, go at that kind of structure to have that kind of interaction where kids are on task, talking about things, working together. And even if you looked at the kids in the background, they're all on task. And you can't do that just when the day the camera shows up to film somebody. That has to be something that goes on. It's a normal part of a structure. And so, you know, we can think about a foundation for classrooms. How do you build that kind of thing? And by asking ourselves 4 questions, and it's still early enough in the year to consider 4 really big questions to think about as you plan to build a foundation for learning. And, you know, one of those we talk about a lot of times is, you know, why are we here? We're here to learn, and we have to focus on learning. And, you know, to learn something, what do your brain have to do? Well, it has to think. So we have to build learning around thinking. And in order to think and do that well, we have to put forth an effort. And it takes big effort, and we have to be able to get kids to want to give the kind of effort, to be able to want to have those conversations, to write on their post-it notes, to have the conversations with their peers, to learn. And finally, we can't ever forget that everybody's a person, right? And people have needs, and so we want to make sure that we're giving kids the attention that they deserve. And these are four big concepts, and I really want to spend our time today around the second one, thinking, because I think for any of us new to the profession, if you can get kids thinking in your classroom, you reduce behavior problems, you increase enjoyment, and you get that engagement that Danielson, the Kentucky framework, is talking about, that we looked at a little bit earlier. So let's get started and think about, particularly, we're going to work on thinking. If we get some time, we'll move beyond that. But I want to think about this idea of, to learn something, your brain must be able to think. In fact, this is not just a quote, this is research. And Daniel Willingham, who writes a really, really great book, says this about thinking. He talks about that memory is not about what you want or try to remember. It's really about what you think about. And so he says memory is the residue of thought. And I love that. I love that last part of that quote. Memory is the residue of thought. But I'm not near as fancy as Daniel Willingham. And so how I remember that is this. So you can choose Daniel Willingham's quote, or you can choose Rick's. And Rick says, you can't remember what you don't think about. If you're an English teacher and you say there's a double negative, there's all kinds of things wrong with that. Yeah, I don't disagree. But it helps me remember that I have to make sure, if I want my kids to learn my content and remember it beyond the test, I got to make sure they think. I was working in a school in Illinois last week, and I shared this slide with the group in the afternoon after I was there for the day. And the teacher said, wow, you just gave me an aha. I just gave my test to the kids a couple days ago, and today I referred back to the stuff that was on the test, and they were like, I don't remember, I don't know. And she's so frustrated. We just took a test on this, y'all, and you don't remember it. And she said, you know what? I don't have my kids think about it. We're just doing stuff. Boy, it's powerful, isn't it? So you gotta get kids to think along the way. And so you're going to need some tools to do that, because we really want the brain, even though it's a small part of our body, it uses up to 20% of the body's energy. And so we want to really be able to get that energy going. And I love to look at how the brain, how do we engage the brain, and what happens when we get kids to think as opposed to just recall information and do worksheets all the time. Let's do this little test. Let's see how you do. Here's the first question. 4 times 5. Of course you know it's 20. 5 times 6. Of course you know it's 30. Now, think about how you came up with the number 20 and the number 30. Bet you're thinking, well, I didn't even have to think about it. It's just already there. I know that. I know it. Here's the third one. How do you see what happened in your mind? See, you couldn't, that's not there. It's not automatic. That one you had to process. You had to start turning them upside down and say 7 times 4 is 28, blah, blah, blah. You start figuring that out in your head, or you started thinking, where's my calculator? Either way, you had to start thinking about that one, because it didn't come readily to you. You had to use your brain to do it. Now let's look at a brain scan of a person who's thinking about things that are already known. And these are stored in the back part of the brain. But let's look at what happens to this region, the prefrontal cortex, that place where we make decisions, problem solve, the skills of the 21st, the skills of AI generation are going to be around being able to problem solve. I just read this from the Amazon CEO the other day. And actually, I made a slide of that. I should put that in here. that it's going to be thinking and problem solving are going to be the success in the future in the AI generation. But look what happens to the brain when you're thinking about something. Boom. See how that's lit up? Amazing. This is what we want our kids' brains to be doing every day in our classrooms. And when they're doing this, they're really focusing on the learning you want them to hang on to and not other stuff that they get themselves into. Challenge, people like challenge. So what are we going to do to light up kids' brains like this? And I want to show you 3 ideas. The first one is we can generate conversations and thinking just by changing the questions that we ask in classroom. And so here's our first tool. And I want to connect it back to the Danielson framework for teaching. This is our evaluation system. And I want to pay attention to accomplished versus exemplary. And one of the things that we do in the thoughtful classroom is we pay attention to what's the difference? How do I level up my lesson from accomplished to exemplary? So on your next evaluation that's coming up, how can you move Danielson 3B from accomplished to exemplary? I'm going to show you a tool, really help you do that. Plus, it's going to help your kids learn the content. And so if we break down the 3B, accomplished and exemplary, you see the accomplished on the left. Let's look at the thing on the right. So what do you notice as a difference between the first line exemplary and the first line of accomplished? Well, there's a good chance you saw the word variety versus no specific thing, just ask questions. And maybe you saw a lot about thinking, and there's high level thinking. So not just surface level thinking, but deep thinking. And there's a great word there, metacognition, thinking about yourself as a learner. And if we go to the bottom piece, this is probably the biggest challenge in moving from accomplished to exemplary, and that is getting kids to ask questions, initiate conversation, and hold each other accountable. The kinds of things that you saw in that video montage. Well, this tool that I'm going to share with you really attacks both of these things in yellow. I think this is exciting. And this particular tool is called Questioning in Style. And I will put this up in, Mary, I will put this up in the chat or something, and so they can access this here in a few minutes, or we'll get it up to them. So if they want it, they can have it. Notice what this tool does. It provides different styles, so there's a variety. It deepens and tests thinking, so there's that higher level thinking, and it's very engaging. Harvey Silver, the president, founder of the Thoughtful Classroom, and one of the world's foremost authorities on teaching and learning around the world, says if you change the question, you change the thinking in the classroom. And questions are a big thing. We spend about 60% of our teaching day asking them, listening to the answers, and giving feedback. So it's a big part of what we do as teachers. And that's good news, because effective questioning is good teaching. It does a lot of good things for us. But this is a good news, bad news story. And the bad news is that only one style of question seems to dominate our classrooms. Anyone take a guess as to what that style of question is? Well, if you were saying basic recall, you were exactly right. In fact, John Hattie says in his research that 75% of the questions we ask are basic recall questions. Now, Rick's not saying that asking a basic recall question is a bad thing. I'm not saying that. So don't go out and say, well, this guy we talked to us today on the screen said shouldn't be asking these recall questions. I did not say that. I did not say that. We just can't ask them 75% of the time. There has to be more. And this tool gives us more. But why is that a bad thing, right? Why is recall questions bad all the time? Well, they impede thinking because they're based on yes, no, right, wrong answers. They're after answers. And so there isn't much thinking about that. It really impedes it. So that inhibits classroom conversation. There's not much to talk about. It's right or it's wrong. Here's why it's right. Here's why it's wrong. There isn't much debate. So we need questions that open conversation, that open student thinking. And all of that reduces engagement because this is a right, wrong, yes, no. And if I'm not good at answers, I'm not going to risk taking a chance on that in the classroom. So we've got to find a better way. And here's a better way. So think about the brain having 4 thinking muscles. It has a recall muscle, a reasoning muscle, an imagination muscle, and a relating muscle. The chart that you see on the right-hand side of the screen. So think about the brain having these muscles. And we need to, and what do you do to a muscle to get it to grow? You got to exercise it. And we got to exercise these muscles. And we're only exercising the recall. I mean, it's like it's buff, but the rest of these things are very weak. And in fact, I often ask teachers in my trainings, do you hear kids saying, I didn't really understand what that question was asking me to do? And almost every time people say, oh yeah, that happens all the time. Well, this is proving the rule, because when we ask questions, and the state test is full of these other kinds of reasoning, imagining, and relating questions. And then, by the way, look at the little cloud under imagine. What if? Where have you seen that before in the last 15 minutes? In the Danielson framework, it specifically talks about what if types of questions. So you see, this is very connected to the things that we do. It's connected to good learning. And it means these kinds of things, having kids think about these kinds of things in each of these muscle groups, if we can use that analogy. And the state test is full of compare and contrast and synthesizing and creating and divergent thinking and reflecting and evaluating and making a decision about something. The tests are full of this, and they will always be full of it. And yet 75% of our classroom time is spent remembering, restating, summarizing important things. But there has to be more. So you say, well, golly, Rick, how in the world am I going to have time to do all that? I'm already overloaded here with this stuff, and I've got these curriculum programs I'm trying to learn, and they're bell to bell, and they're wearing me down. I get all that, and I hear it all from teachers. But let me show you how you can overlay. See, tools are not an or. It's not a I've got my curriculum or I've got a thoughtful classroom tool. No, it's I've got my curriculum and I have a thoughtful classroom tool. And that's a powerful word here. And so think about a tool as an and. How do I use this and my curriculum to really build that kind of thinking and conversations I want to have in my classrooms? Well, I'm going to show you how to do this. So fear not that this will even take you a long time. This will be very simple. When you get your copy of the tool, I want you to pay a close attention to this page. This is the question STEM menu. I call it the STEMs page. And what you notice about that, take a look at that page and think about what you notice. So hopefully what you notice is that they're a set of stems that lead you right down the path of asking a question to get kids to practice, to build those muscles, mental muscles in each of those quadrants. And I'm going to give you some examples, and I'm going to show you 3 ways to use this chart with your students starting tomorrow. Maybe even, well, school's probably about out today, but tomorrow. You can use them with your verbal questions, you can use them with your tasks, and you can get kids to use them as well. So when you get this chart, so jot this down as what to do, my to-do list. When you get this chart, don't forget about the recall. We're good at asking those recall questions. I mean, there's some good stems in there, but for the purposes of expanding here, pay attention to the other 3: relating, creating, reasoning. And pick out one in each of those quadrants that you really like, that just kind of stand out to you. Like, well, I like that stem. I could add some stuff to that and make that a question. And I always say, put one of each of these in your pocket. So you got 3 new question stems that you can ask instead of just asking your recall. Now, just for the sake of sharing, I'll share my 3 favorites. So my favorite reasoning question is, how would you support that? How would you prove that answer? How would you disprove that? You know, see, those are great science type things, I think. And I think they're good in math and language art. I mean, you can use them in anything, but they fit good across all content areas. And it's a question you can ask to get kids to reason, because to answer a question like that, no matter what the content is, I'm going to have to think about it a minute. My favorite imagine question is, what might happen if? It's the old, I'm a Star Trek original series fan. I mean, I must say. And the Kobayashi Maru. If you don't know what that means, I don't have time to explain it. But a Kobayashi Maru is the how do you figure this out? What is a way to do this? What's a different way to figure this out? Solve this problem. So these are imagine type questions. So what might happen if this scenario happened? What would you do? I like that. I like that STEM, and I can use it a lot in my class. And my third one, my favorite one, is, how do you feel about? Woo, you know, if you ask somebody what they feel about something, they can tell you all kinds of stuff about any topic you want, because everybody feels something or has an opinion about things. So you can see how these questions really could create debate. That's what we're looking for, because the more kids argue over our content, the more they're actually going to remember. And so here's 3 questions I try to put in my pocket and keep them and use them when I think I need to change things up and get kids to think. And maybe I ask a recall question, and then maybe I follow that up with one of these others, or vice versa. It doesn't matter. I want to pause right here for this first wave, verbal questions. If there's any questions or comments that you want to ask about or say. Anything coming in over the chat, Mary?
No, not yet, Rick. Now they will get a copy of the stems and the form, the tool, right? You'll be dropping that in the chat, and I can put it in the folder for them.
They'll get all of those things. Yep.
Okay, good.
All right. Well, if you have a question or thought, throw it in the chat, or like I said, feel free to stop and talk about it. I'm fired up about this. I hope you're as fired up about it as I am. Let's move on to the next one. So here's the second way.
In the chat, I really like how you can use these along with the DOK chart to create those higher order questions. Is in the chat. That's a great comment.
Yeah, these are perfect for thinking about the DOK. Absolutely. Thank you for putting that in there. The second way that you can use the chart is in getting kids to respond. And here's a math teacher who was going to teach a series of lessons to teach equivalent fractions to her students. And so a few days before she started her series of lessons, she sat down and she wrote 4 questions to really help guide the kids' thinking and to get them to think deeper about equivalent fractions. I'm going to show you the 4 things she came up with. Here's the first one. This is a recall question. Now, you would expect to see a question like that in mathematics, and it's a good question. And often, if you think about it, these are all the kinds of questions that we see for the most part. And so, how do we expand that? Well, here's how she expanded it. So she wanted a reasoning question around equivalent fractions. And here's what she came up with. How is it possible that the numerator and denominator can change, but the value remains the same? Explain that. So you got to think about that a second. Understand how it works. Here was a relating question. Really asking kids to explain it to someone else. Boy, there's a whole new task. I can do it on the numbers. Now I got to talk about how it works and how do you do it to someone else. See how powerful that is to really deepen and reinforce the learning around equivalent fractions. And here was the last one, a whimsical one, right? Outside the box thinking. How are equivalent fractions like fraternal twins? Whew. Now she might have had to tell them what fraternal twins were, but then after that, they had to put the pieces together. How does this connect to equivalent fractions? Now, this particular teacher chose to use these through the series of lessons, and she chose to do this as a bell ringer So when kids came in to get ready for the day, she offered one as a practice, and she offered one to think a little deeper and then think a different way. And she also used them as an exit slip. So she used them as ways to, depending on where she needed them in the course of her lessons, to really deepen and reinforce this. That's how she used them. But you can use them any way you want. The most important thing is that you build these and you start using them. And so you could do this even overlaying your curriculums that you have. And you might say, well, my curriculums already have questions. Well, sure they do. But do those questions meet the 4 muscle groups? Because sometimes just because it's a word doesn't mean the actual action is going to be imagining or relating or reasoning. So you can use the questions in your curriculum, but you can use this map to help you figure out where does that fit? Because I've got to be practicing all of these, and I got to practice them on a regular basis. You can't just do them when they show up in your curriculum and go, "Well, I'll do one every 2 weeks." You need to be doing one every day, getting kids to think about different quadrants every day. Here's a social studies teacher who did the same thing, sat down and wrote 4 questions to help guide the learning in U.S. government. And then even every tool is kindergarten through 12th grade, and even in college. So no worries there. And here's a primary health and PE teacher. Came up with these 4 ideas. And all they did was take that stems page I'm going to send you, found some stems, added some content to it. You're an expert in your content, so that's the easy part. And so you don't have to be creative in mind. So I can create stuff like that. You don't have to. We give you the stem. You just add the content you know. Voila. And we have these examples are also in the tool, at least some of them. And so you have a model. You can just use them as a model as you get started. Easy to get this off the ground. Easy to get it going. The third way was to get kids to use it. And I think no better way than well, first we'll remember that, what was that exemplary criteria? The kids ask questions, right? Initiate the conversation. And so I'm going to share with you 3 different teachers and how they've decided to use the STEMS page. And I would encourage you to Xerox it off and give it to your students. Now, if you're a kindergarten teacher, you can still use this, right? You can still do it. You give the kids the actual stems. You have them think about what the response would be, talk about it. You can even lead that discussion and gradually release that out to them. But it's certainly a tool for kindergarten as well. But 3 teachers. The first teacher, his name is Charlotte. And Charlotte decided that she really wanted to practice reasoning, creating, and relating questions, and she wanted kids to start using them. And here's what she came up with. If we were in her class on Monday morning, we would hear her saying, "Oh, and by the way, boys and girls, our stems of the week are," and she selects 3 stems each week. And the kids know by now, because we've been in school for, half a quarter, that means that as much as I can use the stems this week, I'm trying to see how many times I can do it. So when I'm working in a partner, if I'm working in a small group in school, it doesn't matter, just not have to be in her class, anybody's class. When I go to football practice this afternoon and I've got to ask a question, or when I go home, I'm going to visit my grandma for dinner this weekend, and I'm going to try to use a stem or 2 and ask some family members some different kinds of questions. And kids, and this has become fun. And they're always coming in, telling about some question they asked somebody that made them go, "What? I have to think about that a minute." Isn't that great? I mean, and she doesn't record them. She doesn't grade them. She's not trying to do that. She just said, "Let's see how many you can ask this week of these stems, and then let me know how it's going." And the kids are just, having so much fun with that. And in a way, beginning to use and think about questions that are much higher than usual. This is Charlotte. Charlotte said, "Hey, I'm going to make a cardstock page out of this and put a spinner on it." And so as she's talking, or as the kids are working in groups, it really doesn't matter the activity, whatever they're doing in class, she will pause and she will say, "Hit the spinner." And so a kid will hit the spinner wherever the spinner stops, whatever quadrant, that kid has to ask a question about whatever the task is or whatever she's lecturing or talking about, teaching some content. Then they have to come up with a question, and then the kids all think about the question and see how they can respond to it. See how interactive that is, how spontaneous it is, how it keeps people on their toes. Man, I like that idea. This last one is John. And John said, hey, I can use that sheet as a way to help my kids study as well. And so he asked kids, as part of their studying for exams, to write test questions using a STEM. So they have to write a STEM, each STEM, use a STEM from each quadrant to write some questions. He then collects those from his students. He knows what he needs to test over, so he sorts through, finds the ones he thinks best measure the things he needs to measure, and that's their test. And so they're actually writing their own test questions and then coming back as a group and answering them. Another nifty way. You, I'm sure, will come up with other ways in which you could use this chart to get kids asking questions and actually using it. A powerful, simple little tool totally transforms classrooms. In fact, teachers who use questioning and style report back to us. We collect this kind of information, and we hear constantly that, man, my kids are learning more. There's more recall of my content. They're more actively engaged. They're becoming better thinkers. Man, that's one of the things the tool is designed for. And they're beginning to ask their own questions. Questioning is not a weird thing anymore or a strange thing. Or, some people are just really good at answering questions. Like, he always has a great question to ask. I never know what to ask. You see, well, we haven't been trained to do this as kids, like we're going to train our kids in the new generation. And a deeper understanding. Man, we can get an understanding out of that. I think that's very exciting. So let me pause again and think about questioning in style. What questions, comments, snide remarks even might come to mind.
I've always liked this tool just because it helps to formulate the questions. It gives stems and you can readily use it with kids. It's always been a good tool that I utilized even back in the day.
It's a great tool. It's really a top shelf tool. It transforms classrooms because I always like to think about it this way. And maybe this will be my final thought on questioning and style. Before we've got two more tools we got to dig into here today, at least two. Arsenio Hall had a TV show, late night TV show, many years ago. I don't know how long. It was in the early 90s, I know, when I first started teaching. And one of the segments he had on his show was called this: Things That Make Me Go, That's the kind of question you're looking for, right? What questions can I ask to make my kids go, I'll think about that a minute before I can come up with an answer. Then you're exploding that prefrontal cortex. It's lighting up and they're thinking. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for thinking. So the first way we can improve thinking is just change the questions that we're asking kids and have them respond to. The second way we can build this culture of thinking is to pause, slow down, and make time for thinking. We have to make time for thinking. And, I say this all the time: caution, slow down. I mean, we're caught up in this rat race of trying to get from one side of the curriculum to the other. And in the wake of that is a lot of teacher frustration, just like that teacher up in Illinois last week who was very frustrated with the results. You work very hard to design, deliver instruction, and you pour your heart and soul into it, only to find out a couple of days later, nobody remembers. And so we got to get kids to think, because you can't remember what you don't think about. So we have to slow down. We have to process things out. How many of you have ever seen Lucille Ball show where Lucy and Ethel are in the chocolate factory? And the chocolates are coming down the conveyor belt, and they're trying to get them wrapped and put into the box, and the thing keeps coming, and they can't get them folded quick enough, and they start sticking them down their shirt, trying to eat as many as they can, throwing them away, whatever they can do to them to try to deal with them. Well, this is a lot like the conveyor belt of learning in classrooms. We keep pouring stuff in on them, and it just keeps coming and coming and coming, and it's not deep learning. It's surface level. I remembered it maybe for a second or two, maybe during the class period, but it's gone after that. And we can't pour this stuff into kids' heads, because we can teach faster than kids can learn. We can teach faster than they can learn. And so I want you to write down this next phrase, because this is an important thing to remember. So it's another Rickism, right? So yeah, you can't remember what you don't think about. And this one, fast teaching leads to fast forgetting. Fast teaching leads to fast forgetting. There's another thing, right? So I got to get kids to think, and I got to slow down, because teaching fast is teaching forgetting. So how can we work on that? Well, this is a great little tool you're going to get. It's called the power of pause. Now, the power of pause is a combination of several tools that give you options to help kids pause on a regular basis. Okay, so this will be a series of things. And what I tell people to do is, when you get this tool this weekend, thumb through it and see which one jumps out at you. You say, oh, I like that one. Take that one and go next week and pause. Use it to get kids to pause and think about what they're learning. Just a few times during the course of a lesson. That'll make a difference. And then you can add different ones, but just pick one. I'm going to highlight just a few of those in this tool bank called the power of pause. We want to help kids pause both before learning, during learning, and after learning. And one of the things that we can do during learning is help them monitor their attention. Have you ever had a kid that you thought slipped away in their own mind? They sort of lost focus, lost their attention. For that matter, how many times have we adults lost our train of thought, right? We've lost our attention on something. And so a lot of teachers like to use this part of the tool, and they'll I've seen teachers make Xerox of these things and tape them to students' desks, and just pause and say, okay, so where are you in your attention right now? And kids think, well, I'm a 3, 2, 1. It's not something you do verbally necessarily. It's just, here's a way to remind yourself, where are you right now? Are you really focused on what I'm talking about? Or are you daydreaming about something else? Or, playing with your pencil eraser? What are you doing? And then the next part of that tool is, how do you get kids to refocus? So here's some refocus ways. So if you find yourself as a 1 or a 0, here's what you can do. You can sit up straighter in your seat or move around a little bit. You can tell yourself, clear your mind. Just back to concentrate on what the teacher's talking about. Concentrate on what I'm working on right now. You can jot down a note, write a question, or make a connection to the content. That makes me think of something I've seen my uncle do or talk about or whatever. Just gives kids a way to get their minds back on track. And so that's one pause. Pause to think about, where am I in terms of my thinking right now? Teachers love this one. It's called stop, slow, go. And I've seen it done a number of ways. The way I see it most is that a teacher takes some construction paper, red, yellow, green, cuts them into squares. Every kid has a set. And you have to teach kids how to use this. You have to build a culture, right? Because you say, wow, kids won't do that. Sure they do. I see it all the time. And I like this one because you don't have to do anything. You just got to watch. So you train the kids. If you're good with what we're doing, or if you're working in a group and everything is smooth, you know what's going on, you're not lost, they're feeling good about it, then you leave the green card on top. If I start getting a little too fast, or this is starting to get in over your head on these examples or the modeling that we're doing, you slip the yellow one on top. So as a teacher, you're just watching the colors. If you start seeing yellows pop up, well, I got to slow down for a minute, see where we are. If it's all green, green is go. And then somebody pops up a red, whoa, I got to stop, see what's going on. And so you don't have to stop and say anything. You're just monitoring the cards. And teachers who use this and train kids to use it, you build that relationship in your classroom. It works a lot. I've seen people use cups for that too, but cups get knocked off. I wouldn't use cups, but it's up to the individual person. Here's Rick's favorite, clear and cloudy. Man, I love this little tool. This is so simple. Let me tell you how it works. It's a T-chart, as you can see on the screen. What's clear and what's cloudy. And here's how you use it. So whatever you're doing, if you're teaching, if the kids are reading, if they're working in a group, doesn't matter what they're doing, whatever the task is towards learning, whatever your learning target is today, or whatever your concept is today, you just teach a chunk or let kids work a while in the group, and then you stop them and you say, okay, get your T-chart out. Now I want you to take 60 seconds and jot down what's clear about the learning target, what's clear about the concept, what's cloudy. 60 seconds, go. Then you back to group work, back to teaching, back to doing whatever. Do another chunk, stop. Back to your T-chart, kids. What's clear, what's cloudy? 60 seconds, jot it down. You do that 4 or 5 times during the learning, and you see kids processing now. Well, let me think about that. I understand that part, but boy, I'm still a little cloudy about that part. So this is a really great way to help kids think about what's going on. If you're a kindergarten teacher, you're just going to create a T-chart on your board or on some chart paper, whatever, and you're going to pause every so often. You're going to say, okay, what's clear? Susie, what's something that's clear in your mind about this? Susie says whatever. How many are clear like Susie on that part? Get hands up. So you're just checking in. You want kids to think. It's not about what they write down. You can use it as formative assessment, yes. But I like to think about it as a way to get kids to process the thinking that's going on real time. Now, some people say, Rick, I got this thing that's clear and cloudy, but I'll do it a little bit differently. And I always make a sigh, because they're going to tell me that they use thumbs up and thumbs down. And thumbs up and thumbs down is perfectly fine to get a feel for the group. But clear and cloudy takes it a step further, because it processes it by either the students writing it down, or in case of kindergarten, early first grade, you're writing it down. But there's a processing of it. There's a doing something with it, not just I'm up or down. Because I got to write down what I'm clear about and write down what I'm cloudy about. I can't just say, hey, I'm good. I'm thumbs up. And you have to train kids on how to do that, be honest about it as well. But you can't see the thinking. This is visible learning here. The last one is called a single sentence summary. It's simply this way. You teach kids, and you have to model this and teach it. But boy, read a paragraph, stop, pause, summarize that paragraph into one sentence. Move on to the next paragraph. Read it, stop, pause for a minute, think about what you read, and write another sentence. So when you read a text, instead of a whole bunch of text to go back and think about, you've now got summary statements of each of the pieces. This is great for students who struggle, students with IEPs and that kind of thing. The teachers like that really love that. They teach the kids the summaries, but it's good for every kid. These are some of the tools in the tool, Power of Pause. And again, I've given you a little taste of each one, but you can read more in depth about it inside the tool when you get it. Just pick one and give it a try next week and see how you see kids thinking better, processing more, probably remembering more of their content that you're trying to get them to learn. So that takes us through 2 moves that we can make to build a culture of thinking. The third one, focus on explanations rather than answers. Now, once again, don't leave this meeting and go, well, we saw this guy named Rick, and he said we shouldn't be trying to get any answers. he's crazy. He didn't know what he's talking about. I didn't say that. I don't even think that. I'm just saying focus first on explanation, then get to the answer, because then there lies the thinking, you see. When we're just going after the answer, it's just about forget the thinking, let's just get this right or wrong. When you go after the why, when you go after the explanation, boy, then the understanding really kicks in. Then you get to the answer. Okay, so it's not either or, it's and. Get an explanation and get to the answer if you're looking for an answer. Okay. So what we're going to do for explanations. Well, let's go back to for this tool. Let's go back to the Danielson framework. And here's our old accomplished and exemplary thing. And if we look at the criteria for 3A, accomplished, it's really essentially these things. And if we want to level up a lesson, here's some things that we can do. We can link students' interest to the lesson. So we got to clearly state the purpose. That's the learning target, things like that over and accomplished. But if we really want to move it into exemplary, we got to connect to student interest. There's a tool for that, by the way. You also have to focus on conceptual understanding, help kids to think about this in bigger terms. And this is where that explanation thing comes in handy. You also have to get kids to explain concepts to each other. Explain the concept, not just talk, explain the concept. Here's my reasoning. And last, you got to build vocabulary. How are kids growing their own vocabularies? There's a tool to support all of these things. But the one I want to focus on here is around this one. Students explaining concepts to peers. And this first one is so simple. I want you to just try this out with me. Think of a true statement in your content area. I'll give you an example. I'm a science teacher. Most leaves on deciduous trees turn color and fall off before winter. It's true. The next thing is answer your own question with the why. Why is it true? What was the first word you used in your mind to answer why it was true? Let's go out to the audience. Let's see if how we can figure this out. Brandy Justice, are you there? Can you think about, could you tell us what word was in your mind when you went to answer that question? What's the first word that came to your mind when you answered your question?
Rick, we're about at time. We've got about 1 minute left for today.
So I better not wait for the answer then.
Sorry.
So the answer that you all said was the word because. And that's the tool, because. Starting next week, starting tomorrow is Friday, go to your class and say, boys and girls, today, every time you give an answer, I want you to give me your because. And so, why do trees lose their leaves? Because. Here's the answer. It'll take 2 weeks to get kids to start doing that. But in 2 weeks' time, if you stick to that, you'll start hearing them say, I think it's this because. And they'll give their reasoning. They're making their answers visible. And everybody else is hearing their answers. And so we know that this is your because. It's a simple move, but it trains kids to give their reasoning and their evidence. And so when they get to state testing and it says provide evidence and reasoning for your answer, they go, oh, that's my because. I've been doing that all year. I got this. Simple. But this gets kids to explain things. Talk about why they say an answer is true or not. It doesn't have to be, it's their thought. Support your thinking with your reasoning. That's the because habit. And so I think these three tools, simply applied with your own curriculums, or if you design your own, that's great. I love that. I love being able to design your own stuff. Three tools that can really help your kids ramp up the thinking and remember the content more. So we got questioning in style, the power of pause, and the because habit. And that will get you well on your way to building a classroom that has a lot of thinking happening. Thank you all very much again for joining. I hope you found this quite helpful, and I hope to see you sometime down the road. Thanks, Mary.
Awesome, Rick. Thank you so much. If you will send me links or PDFs of those tools, we will drop that in their folder. I have dropped in the chat for you all. I'm so glad to see Tina and Sophie here and Victoria. Thank you all. Maggie, appreciate you all. Great tools to utilize just to really increase engagement and to help with your classroom management. It just really changes the whole atmosphere and culture of your room. But if you will take a second to fill in the feedback survey and make sure your email is correct, because if it is not correct, it will not be able to email you the certificate. So as soon
Mary,
as
do
you
you
hit,
want me to put those in the? I'm sorry.
as soon as you hit, you're fine. As soon as you hit submit, it should email you the certificate within 5 minutes. What was the question, Rick? I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, would you rather me just to send those to you and you put them in the folder, or put them in the chat? What do you want me to do? Just send them to you?
If you'll just send them to me, or you could drop them in the chat and I can get them and drop them in the folder from there. That way the people in the room right now get it, but I will drop their folder in there so that they can get to it as well. But they will all be in your participant folder that you all have been getting, and it's the same folder each time.
Yeah, I'll drop those in the.
Okay.
I'll drop those in the chat.
And I'll make sure I can get a hold of them too. And I will stop recording. Thank you all for being here. I hope everything's going great. Bless your hearts. It's always a whirlwind after school, trying to get things situated, and just appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Hope you all have a great day and rest of your evening, and